Meshtastic is a piece of open source software that can run on a variety of programmable microcontrollers with LoRa modules and turn them into an off-grid mesh text messaging network. Previously you had to use a phone to send messages though, but included in the latest version of Meshtastic is now a fully fledged graphical user interface that works with standalone devices such as the Lilygo T-Deck. This is Meshtastic UI. Getting the latest version of Meshtastic actually requires you entering a secret code that I will show you later. But first, let me ask you this. What do you want out of Meshtastic? If you just want to play around with small, cheap radio devices, do experiments with your friends and learn about antennas, propagation, and the strengths and limitations of radio communication, then Meshtastic is a great way to get started in the hobby. But I also see that some people think that Meshtastic could replace cell phones or be a viable large-scale alternative to commercial network infrastructure. And this is definitely not what Meshtastic is. Meshtastic is purely for short text messages, not data, not voice communication. And we've already seen that Meshtastic doesn't do too well with large-scale networks at this point, although this new update actually attempts to improve this as well. But even in the best case scenario, this kind of technology is not suitable for nationwide networks with a bunch of users. A third use case I've seen mentioned is as a communication method in emergency situations where cell phone and internet connections are down. If we imagine household members or neighborhood friends wanting to easily communicate with and maybe track locations of each other, this scenario makes some sense. But so far this has required not only having the Meshtastic devices set up and ready, but also that each potential participant needed to have the Meshtastic app on their phone already installed. Because if the internet is down, you cannot get this, and without the app, most Meshtastic devices are completely useless. And this has kind of made Meshtastic not seem like a very good prepping tool that you could just set and forget. Until now. Lilygo has made standalone Meshtastic-capable devices for a while now. First came the T-Deck, which was only a screen and keyboard with a LoRa module. So you had to supply your own battery, GPS and 3D printer case, which isn't particularly beginner-friendly. But then came the T-Deck Plus. Thanks to Lilygo for sending me this one. And this comes completely ready to use in a case with a battery and GPS, and it's even prepared for you to add your own optional external antenna for better range. But so far, the default Meshtastic firmware has simply looked like this on the T-Deck, and you got the same information on the display as any other device with a smaller screen. And even though it was technically possible to type out a message on the keyboard, it was terribly slow and you had no message history, and all settings has to be changed from the phone app anyway, basically negating all the advantages of the T-Deck. The Meshtastic developer team have actually been working on a much better solution for a while, and if you knew how, you could install this work-in-progress version, but it was a bit tricky and slightly broken. And eventually they closed down the public builds as the firmware wasn't quite ready for public use yet. But now we finally have an easy way to install the new 2.6.0 firmware, even though the Meshtastic dev team still considers it a pre-alpha preview. This is how to install the new Meshtastic UI. Go to the Meshtastic web flasher. Plug in your Lilygo T-Deck. Hold down the trackball and turn it on by sliding the power button down. It won't show anything on the display. Select T-Deck as the target device. Now we need to enter the good old Konami cheat code by pressing the following buttons on your computer keyboard. Up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A. The background will turn black and you can now select the 2.6.0 pre-release. Click Flash and make sure to do a full erase and install, as well as enabling the Meshtastic UI. Select your device in the pop-up. Once the install is done, you need to turn your T-Deck off and on again to see it running the new UI. You can navigate the new UI by using the T-Deck touchscreen. First, you have to select what region you are in and pick your name, and you're ready to go without ever having used a phone app. You can turn on the GPS by tapping the GPS icon. On the left, you can navigate between the list of notes heard, your group channels, the top one is regular long fast chat, and a list of active chats. You can use the keyboard to type out messages and it works perfectly. And then there is the map, which is one of the big new working features in this version. You can use the map to see where other nodes are in relation to you. But you can also put actual map files onto an SD card and see where the nodes are in real life. You will need to use a FAT32 formatted micro SD card. And I will link to where you can get some map tile files below. But it's only really viable to download the worldwide map files up until a certain zoom level. So you will probably need to generate map tile files yourself for your area if you want to be able to zoom to an actual useful zoom level. Now I can finally imagine this thing being useful in an emergency situation. You could get a bunch of T-Decks that you can keep ready to hand out to family and friends if cell phone networks go down. And maybe a couple of other devices like a T-Beam or a Heltec that you can plug in and use as repeaters either in your attic or halfway between your houses powered by a solar panel. Don't trust your entire emergency communication on these little hobby devices though. You should probably get a few handheld radios as well, just in case. Another big new feature in this firmware version is the new Next Hop routing feature for direct messages. Previously, when you sent a message, it would try to propagate through the network by a flooding approach, where every node tried to repeat every sent message, so that it would eventually reach the intended recipient. But the new Next Hop routing feature tries to identify a more efficient route through the mesh so that we avoid too many unnecessary packets causing congestion. This new firmware is fully backwards compatible and simply reverts back to managed flooding for older nodes. Meshtastic runs on small, cheap microcontroller boards that have LoRa modules on them. But Meshtastic is just one of many projects that these boards can be used for, since they are made for all kinds of Internet of Things scenarios, like remote sensors and even tiny satellites. LoRa modules are little radio transceivers that communicate by transmitting tiny data packages on license-free ISM bands at very low power and use clever signal processing to make the signals reach much further than otherwise possible at such low power. It's not magic though, and you still need a relatively clear line of sight path between your devices to get a good, stable connection. I'm very happy to finally see Meshtastic UI available without having to jump through too many hoops. I think Meshtastic is much more interesting on standalone devices, and this new firmware runs on several of them, not just the T-Deck. I hope I've given you a small insight into the new Meshtastic UI.